we're at All Saints Church in Godshill. Isn't it a fascinating place to actually be called God's Hill? Yes, we're on a hill, and it's certainly reverent or revered to God. Most importantly, to start with, we've got the grave of O'Neill, ancestry to King Niall, and it's quite interesting as one of the locals, a chap called John that I've just spoken with, he was saying about, why is it Soldier of the Kingdom of Ireland? Well, that's quite clear, because obviously the Kingdom of Ireland is the United Ireland, and so therefore in lineage we don't class Ireland as north and south, we class it as the Kingdom of Ireland. So it's quite nice and very unusual to see that on the stone itself. The church itself has been here since the sort of Saxon. There's been history of a church since the Saxon times, but it goes back far, far beyond that. This has been a sacred mound for millennia, absolute millennia. And the reasons will unfold as we go on other quests around the country and over to Ireland. And I'll certainly be making reference to this particular church when we do quest 25, which will be over to Ireland and to Tara, because this has a direct link to there. Now we talk about the church, and this is where we say the lines meet. So we talk about the church, about where the lines meet. Now in Templarism that means something really special. And it's where various lines meet, various passages, various travels. So let's go into the church and see much more about it itself. We know that the church itself has the lily as its main representation. We know that in Templarism the lily is indeed sacred alongside the rose, a red rose. So we have the lily and the rose in unity, for want of a better term. The church itself has got some wonderful, wonderful artworks in it, as we can see, and we'll just go around and show the ones that are relevant, and you hopefully get a feel for what the church is really like. It's got a calming sort of energy at this point in time, down at this perfect point in time, I guess. We can see there, I don't know how much you can see on the camera itself, regards to the lions. There's lots of lions there, and the man pleading up to God. Interesting that his hands, because in Templarism, in truth, his hands are actually held like that in prayer. Yeah? In Templarism, we don't actually grasp the hands in prayer as the modern Christians do. We hold our hands to God. We hold our hands up to the skies like this when we pray. We never pray with hands held. So that's quite interesting. Coming along here, you certainly get a feel about how it would have been like back in the day. It's interesting to see that there is and quite rightfully so, there's two particular statues to draw your attention to. And we have the first one here, which is obviously the statue is given in the memory of John Court, gunner, HSE, a servant of the church who was killed in Normandy on the 27th of June 1944. Very apt that we have the Templar, and obviously the Templar shield here as well. So a very nice piece of work, and I would expect to see Templar statues in this particular church, as it were. Just behind the curtain, who lives in a house like this? But just behind the curtain we have, as we go through, obviously it's the vestry where they get dressed, but in particular this is where we have the Judaism coming into Christianity. We have the wonderful statues. Now this particular statue is very typical of the early Judaic representation that would be on many, many graves. And it's quite interesting to see that here. So we have that one, and then we have the anchor, which is the grounding, obviously, when we think about it from a sort of common sense point of view. We have the anchor of grounding, and we have the resting upon the anchor. So he's resting in peace, as it were. So there's some interesting parts there. This part of the building, we've got the usual, we've got the old calling bell, as it were, which I won't ring too much, but it rings. So, and coming back through, we'll start from going up to here. And you've got to imagine that back in the day, in particular, there are so many lines of my line that actually keep here in the church. I mean, for example, we've got my granduncle was involved in the church, George Albert Neville. We've got the granddaughter of Edward King Fordham. Now, although she was involved in the earlier churches over at the one that's mentioned in the Domesday Book that we've already filmed at, she was actually Penelope Amelia Fordham was involved. We have, of course, the infamous Lily May Clark, and then on top of that we have Frank Albert Bartram. So we've got quite a few uncles and aunts of my lineage that have been involved in Godshill, quite rightfully so, over the years. You get a good feel when you get to here. Rosary is particularly of interest to me, when I certainly saw it earlier on. Excuse me. Very nice piece of work there. And as we come up here, this is where the interesting points start to begin. Because what we see here on the actual altar cloth is no doubt the very same symbol that we see on the 30th degree sash of Freemasonry. So we can see our Masonic influence. So this particular griffin, in a very similar thing, we have the eagle as well, but the colours and the shape and the representation is absolutely similar, not identical, similar to the 30th degree sash of Freemasonry in the United Kingdom. So here we can see the wonderful statue. It's as Janice quite rightfully pointed out, he's almost alive and he's holding the keys to the gates. So he's in the right place, actually, ironically. For the church, he's in the right place to be the gatekeeper. And he's certainly representative of the gatekeeper with his red robes. They would normally be represented in red robes or blue robes, and he's got red and gold. So that's quite interesting, really. Some people will probably say that he resembles and is supposed to be representative of the Jesus. I don't believe that to be the case. I believe that he's a representative of the gatekeeper, which would make much more sense from a practicality point of view. Coming round to here, just watching the steps as we go. And we see this wonderful piece of the Old English works written in as well, with the infamous skull. But this particular skull is only used in certain parts of the lands. It does vary, and this is very typical. It's quite interesting because this skull would have been used some 1,000 years ago in burials and sort of that sort of thing, and it's been used in a much nearer time. We're looking at the year 1708, as we can see there, the 18th of March, 1708. Yeah, so it's quite interesting that it's an older style mark for a modern remembrance. Along here, it's the usual things. We've got various dedications. Stained glass windows are quite nice. I have seen better, to be honest, but we've got Gabriel and Michael, which you'd normally see. As we know, Michael can also be referred to as Metatron in many respects, and there's a lot of confusion in the hierarchies of the high angels, the high court angels, as to who Michael really is. So a lot of that is left to people's own interpretation, I guess, which is quite interesting. Just coming down here. I don't know how much of the lighting we can see here, really, because it's quite dark. But we've got the Ten Commandments here, and I just love this particular. We've got the honour thy father and thy mother. But what I particularly like is the third section here. I don't know how much we can see of that in the lighting, but remember that thou keep holy the Sabbath day 6 days. Now, this is where the confusion comes in modern day Christianity. The Sabbath day, what this is telling you is the 6th, that's how it was spoken. The Sabbath day, the Sabbath, is the 6th day. Well, the 6th day in modern times is a Saturday. But how people in my research have understood is that 6 days of work and the 7th day of rest. That's not strictly true. The truth remains that the Sabbath day, as it clearly says here, is the 6th day. Yeah, the Saturday. Saturday is the Sabbath day. Which makes total, when you look at history, you can see why that makes sense. I think obviously you can't get into certain parts of the church where they've got various regalia and things, which is understandable in this day and age, sadly with crime on the increase. But we can certainly see how wonderful it is. And the most interesting thing I saw in there, which was quite wonderful, is they've got the Shire horse and this little cart. Now, the Shire horse is in there, which I found quite unusual to see. It's a modern thing in there. But as we'll all remember, that most of us in our homes had a point in time where we had Shire horses and the barrel cart on the back. And it was at the prize, sort of one of your prized possessions in your house to have a nice Shire horse there as an ornament. You've got various other things in here that are quite interesting. We can clearly see the lily, and we can see the Christ upon the lily. But what's interesting is that his feet are bound together at the bottom, you see, onto one vine. So that has a significance. Moving around, I particularly like this. I don't know how much we can see of that as well. This is particularly nice. I did see it earlier on about whosoever thou art that enterest this church, know that the Lord Christ is here in his holy sacrament reserved, and continues. So that's I find that particularly interesting because it's quite a nice thing that people, I fear, forget as time evolves. Or not even unfolds, but evolves, I guess. Quite a nice statue here, very representative. And if we look at how the statues and the pulpit and everything, if you look at how it's laid out in this church, it's very much laid out the same as a Knights Templar temple. You have the right statues in the right places. We've got the right areas for reverence, the right areas for mirth. We certainly have the wisdom, the strength and beauty. Right, so as we see how it's set up as a Knights Templar temple, really, in many respects, that most people don't even realise. We have the wisdom of the pulpit, the rector, the vicar, the reverend, and his wisdom of the word. So we have the wisdom side. Then we look for the strength, and we see to the far left we have the strength. So the strength of the knight. And then we come back to the central focus when we see the beauty. So we have the wisdom to the right, the strength to the left, and we have the beauty in the central point. And it's laid out that way, but to the average eye that came to visit, they wouldn't realise how this has been laid out. And we even have, if we look at the layout, I say we have the gatekeeper over there in the correct position, which is absolutely fascinating. So let's just follow down this part of the church. You certainly get a sense of calmness here, and certainly a sense of being. And most, again, as we always see, which most people don't even see or realise, we have a slight variation to the shield, and we see the AR once more, which most people to blink would miss, I guess, because it's always kept somewhere high, somewhere secure. And there we have it. This is Godshill Church, Church of the Lily of the Church, All Saints Church, and quite rightfully so, it should be All Saints, because it's where all the lines meet. There's another interesting point to mention about Godshill Church, All Saints Church, is that I'm standing, rightly or wrongly, but I'm standing on the very spot where there was what they class as an illegal pagan burial. Now, the pagan burial happened here in a plan to prevent the church being consecrated, because as we know, pagans at that point couldn't be buried on consecrated ground. However, it failed because the diocese still went ahead with the consecration of the church. Now, that brings a bit of a controversy, because we then have a church that's consecrated, yet it isn't, because it's got a pagan burial. So, which came first, the chicken or the egg? We have